Isekai portal fantasy, video game mechanics, LitRPG with a villain protagonist, and mental health representation. Let's get into it. Hey darling, welcome back. Here on my channel, my goal is to help you find your next book obsession. Here we talk all things fantasy, recommendations, book hauls, and fantasy life in general. So today we're talking about a book called Calamity. Now, a real quick overview from Amazon Summary, just to give you an idea of what we are looking at today. Readers find the plot of Calamity fascinating and compelling with really fun twists. A lot of reviewers even say it is one of the best LitRPGs they've ever read, which, talk about setting up expectations, right? They say it is well written with good character development and really fun villains. So let's dive into this first look and see if this is something that you want to add to your TBR. If you've read this one, drop your thoughts in the comments, but please keep them spoiler-free for those of us who are still on the TBR struggle bus, okay? I want to know if my predictions matched your experience. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? That's the beauty of the first look. This is just figuring out if we want to add it to our TBR, so I might get things wrong sometimes. If you're new to this series, here's the deal. First Look is where I take books that have been calling to me and do a deep dive analysis before I actually read them. So I'm talking cover breakdown, premise analysis, character predictions, and most importantly, I scour the internet for real reader feedback to find the pros, cons, the trigger warnings, and all the honest takes on what this book is actually about. All of this is to help you and me both figure out if we want it on our TBR. I'm really hoping this series helps you find your next book obsession when you're feeling stuck and don't know what to read next. Think of it as book recon. I do the homework so we can both make informed decisions about what's worth our precious reading time. All right, so let's get into the high-level info of this book. This is book 1 in the Knights of Eternity trilogy, which the entire trilogy is published as of recording this video, so you don't have to wait to read them. This is a LitRPG portal fantasy / isekai dark fantasy. It has an average Amazon rating of 4.7 out of 5 stars, and that is out of 245 reviews. So as a side note, this is actually one of the reasons I wanted to push up Calamity on the first look calendar, because from everything that we're about to get into, this sounds like a fantastic story that has not gotten the attention that it deserves. So it's one of my goals, even if it's to help a few more people find this story. I think this is a really high quality one that you're going to enjoy. This is the second take of this video because I didn't hit record the first time. So that's fun. Rachel is a video game writer by day, LitRPG scribbler by night, and an all-around chaos gremlin. Ditto, and you sound fun. Hailing from Ireland, she spent 6 years working on Baldur's Gate 3, where she wrote characters such as Alfira, Auntie Ethel, and Shovel while bemoaning the cost of a pint in Dublin. When she found LitRPG, it was love at first sight, and she poured what was left of her soul into the Knights of Eternity trilogy. Oh, I can relate to that. When not writing, she enjoys wrestling swans, kicking the moon, and lying about her hobbies. Where is the book description? Oh, I have the paperback. Now, when I was at LitRPG Con, I actually stumbled across this book. That's how I found it. And I saw this cover, and I will be completely honest with you, I bought it for the cover. It's gorgeous. Are you kidding me? I don't know what that sound is outside, but we're gonna wait. You done? Okay, I think they're done. Now, unfortunately, even though Rachel was there, I wasn't able to meet up with her, so hopefully she is at DragonCon this year, and I get to accost her there. Let's go ahead and read the book description so you can get an idea of what the story is about. When Zara awoke to find Valerius, leader of the legendary Gilded Knights, towering over her, she thought she had gone mad. She was the Fury, mistress of claw and flame. Armies trembled at her name. Now she lay chained and broken, a prisoner in her own home. But that wasn't why she thought herself mad. Only yesterday she had a different life. She remembered her nephew in the local arcade, struggling to beat the villainous Zara, the Fury, in Knights of Eternity. She remembered her uncle and his big booming laugh, and the gun that changed everything. So yeah, I have been very excited about this book. I have been eagerly awaiting the first look for it. So let's dive in. Okay, so next I want to talk about the cover because it is gorgeous. Everything here, from the art style to the color scheme to the image itself, really captures me, really speaks to me. It's just beautiful. And I think my favorite part is actually her expression, because she just looks wild and untamed. And I love that wild feminine power. I'm fucking here for it. Everything from the wild hair to the claws to the magic in her hand, everything looks so almost feral. And I think that is the real magic of this cover. Now, I'm really curious to see how they're going to continue this. And so I'm not going to go through the other covers in this first look, but I am going to take a peek after recording this to see how they continued the thematic elements from book one and to see if they did a good job doing the rest of the trilogy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the key tropes. We have being transported to a video game world. We have a villain protagonist. We have mental health representation, super cool. We have subverted expectations, namely that the white knight is the bad guy and the villainess is the good guy or gal. So the overall concept here, how do I explain this? A young woman with severe anxiety gets transported into the body of the video game villain she just watched her nephew fight in an arcade. The sentences I get to say in this job are wild. Now she must navigate being the feared Fury while dealing with her own mental health and uncovering the truth about this world. So the story hook, from what I could tell, is what if you woke up as the final boss that everyone is trying to defeat? What a cool hook, right? So here are some of the key takeaways. This isn't your typical power fantasy lit RPG. From what I could tell, it is a deeply emotional exploration of identity, mental health, all wrapped in a video game world that might be more real than virtual. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this book's identity. What's its soul? From what I could tell, this book speaks directly to anyone who has ever felt like they were playing a character in their own life, specifically while dealing with anxiety. The protagonist isn't just transported to another world. She's forced to embody everything she's not. Powerful, feared, commanding. And for readers with anxiety, watching someone navigate being thrust into a role of power while their brain is actively working against them, I mean, that's going to hit different. So I think this is for every reader who's wondered if their anxiety makes them weak, only to discover that understanding fear intimately might actually be a superpower. Okay, so as I've mentioned, there are some mental health trigger warnings that I want to go over. We're going to go into this in more depth in the reader feedback section, but I want to give you an idea of what we're getting into before we go any further. Multiple reviewers specifically praised how the main character's anxiety is written, with several saying that as someone who has anxiety themselves, it felt very real. And I saw a lot of calling the main character very relatable, especially in regards to how her anxiety is written. I saw other people note that as people with anxiety, and specifically social anxiety, they could tell that the author has been there or knows someone who has been there. There are some other broader mental health themes. Several reviews mention that the character has to overcome the intense anxiety from her previous life. And I saw one review describe her as a female main character who clearly struggles with anxiety and self-deprecating thoughts, which was hugely relatable. When it comes to the therapeutic impact, I remember one review that says, I think this book is really going to help someone. And I saw other mentions that this book is going to give someone a much needed boost, which is so cool and such a compelling way to write and evolve anxiety within a fantasy story. It's really cool when a dark fantasy lit RPG can become an uplifting, introspective, and powerful look at an otherwise crippling mental illness. So from what I could tell, mental health, particularly anxiety representation, is a significant and frequently mentioned aspect of this book in reader reviews. The consensus is that the anxiety representation feels incredibly authentic, with multiple readers specifically saying that the anxiety validated their experience. It's relatably written, it's not clinical, it's not superficial, and the book has therapeutic value for readers dealing with similar struggles. The mental health themes are essential to character development and not just throwaway mentions. So I think this would be perfect for an audience who appreciates authentic mental health representation in fantasy. Gotta check that I'm actually recording this time. All right, let's dive into the main character. The main character who becomes Zara is brilliantly written as someone with genuine realistic anxiety, not the Hollywood version, but the real, messy, overwhelming kind. Readers with anxiety consistently praise how authentic her internal struggles feel. She's vulnerable, yet forced to be strong, creating this fascinating tension. Her journey from terrified young woman to someone discovering her own power while maintaining her humanity is compelling. Now, some of the cons about Zara are some readers mention that the beginning is pretty slow as we establish her anxiety in her normal life before the portal fantasy kicks in. So if you're looking for an immediately confident kick-ass heroine, you're going to need patience with this one. The anxiety representation, while authentic, might be triggering for some readers, but like I said earlier, you might find it therapeutic rather than triggering. It's all going to depend on your own experience. So I unfortunately can't give you a yes or no with this one. Let's talk about the side characters. The prose, this cast is diverse and from everything I could tell, very three-dimensional. Valerius is the supposed white knight, who's actually the antagonist, is a wonderful subversion. From what I could tell, each character has their own voice and motivations, and reviewers consistently mention being able to tell whose perspective you're reading just from the narrative voice. The moral complexity, where heroes might be villains and vice versa, adds a nice depth to it. Cons. So unfortunately, beyond that, I didn't find too much about the side characters, and with multiple POVs, some readers might find that the switches between storylines are occasionally jarring. There were also mentions of formatting issues in some of the reviews, like odd chapter breaks, that might make these transitions even more noticeable. Okay, let's dive into the world building. Prose. The world brilliantly blends traditional fantasy elements, knights, dragons, magic, with video game mechanics that feel organic rather than forced. The gradual reveal of how the game systems work within this world seems to be very well paced. And it takes familiar fantasy concepts and makes them feel fresh through the video game lens. The setting feels both fantastical and grounded from everything that I could see. Now, what are some cons to the world building? Some readers wanted more immediate explanation of the game mechanics. The question of whether this is a real world or a virtual reality really isn't immediately clear, which might frustrate readers who prefer more concrete world building rules right up front. And aside from that, I couldn't really find too many cons on the world building. Granted, there are about 250 reviews to go through on Amazon, so it didn't give me a ton to go through, but it was just really, really refreshing to see how many positives there were about the story. So couldn't really find anything else about the world. Okay, so let's talk about the magic system. The prose, the video game abilities activated by catchphrases, apparently, which is really unique and adds a fun theatrical element to the combat. The system reveals itself gradually in a way that makes sense to the narrative, and magic users are competent, and that makes for, what I could tell, really dynamic battle scenes. The fury powers of Claw and Flame are visceral and, as far as I could tell, very well described. So some of the cons, the LitRPG elements are lighter than hardcore LitRPG fans might expect or want. So this one isn't about grinding levels and stats and real deep crunchiness. Some readers looking for detailed game mechanics and progression systems, you might find it too narrative focused. So some additional unique elements that didn't really have a place within my script for this, obviously, Rachel is a video game writer, which is super awesome, and that brings an authentic game narrative expertise to her storytelling. And the writing quality, from everything I could tell, is consistently praised as being above the typical LitRPG standards. So it's complex, it's playful, and has apparently masterful pacing. In terms of cons, at around 300 pages, some readers found it shorter than expected, leaving them wanting more. And apparently there is a cliffhanger at the end of book 1, but luckily book 2 is out, so you can just start reading. All right, let's dive into the reader feedback. The praise. The overwhelming consensus is that this elevates the LitRPG genre through superior writing craft and emotional depth. Readers consistently highlight that the anxiety representation feels incredibly authentic and validating. There are also a lot of comments about the writing quality being complex and playful. That playful really was a word that came up multiple times, so I'm excited for that. These are characters you genuinely care about with real emotional depth. There are plot twists and subverted tropes, keeping the readers guessing. And finishing the book in 1 or 2 sittings was a really common comment from readers who said that they just couldn't put it down. Okay, obviously there were some criticisms, and the ones I could find are relatively minor, if I'm being honest. I mean, the pacing starts slower. We've established that. It's slower than typical LitRPG or Portal Fantasy, and there is a strong focus on establishing the protagonist's life and anxiety right from the start. There were apparently some formatting issues. I know I mentioned that before, but they were pretty common. There are not significant, but there are multiple comments of odd chapter breaks and spacing that break immersion. So I don't know if those have been fixed. Maybe by now they have been fixed because it's been out for a little while, but just keep that in mind. Hopefully the publisher has fixed that by now. Again, this book is shorter than some readers expected for the genre, and not everyone liked the prologue. But even those who said they didn't like the prologue often said that they loved everything after chapter 1, so I think that's a risk worth taking. I will say this is going to be lighter on the game mechanics than hardcore LitRPG fans might want, so if you only read the super crunchy, this one might not be for you. With that, let's talk about the audience info. Who do I think will really love this? I think readers who want mental health representation that feels real and not romanticized, you're going to like this. Fans of Portal Fantasy and Isekai with stories that have emotional depth, I think you're going to like this. Readers who enjoy morally gray characters and subverted tropes, I think you're going to get a kick out of this one. People who want their fantasy with genuine character development and strong narrative pacing, you're probably going to like this one. And honestly, Baldur's Gate 3 fans, if you're curious about one of the writers behind it, I think you're probably going to get a kick out of this one. So who might want to skip it? Readers who want immediate action without character setup, LitRPG fans who prioritize extra crunchiness, so detailed stats and progressions and grinding. Anyone who's really triggered by realistic anxiety representation. Like I said, there were comments that this was, what was the word? Healing and validating. So you might find that this is a pick-me-up, you might find it triggering. Unfortunately, I can't give you the full answer for that. I don't know for sure how this is going to impact you. It's just something I want you to keep in mind if you do pick this one up, okay? I also think that you might not like this if you prefer clear-cut heroes and villains, or dislike multiple POVs and slower burns. So who is the target audience for this story? This is for the reader who picks up a book for the escapism, but stays for the emotional journey. That's my biggest takeaway here. I think it is perfectly positioned for readers who have aged out of YA, but still want that sense of discovery and growth with the added complexity of adult anxieties and trauma, because we all have trauma. Okay, let's talk about some expectations. After I've studied the book, here's what I expect. I'm expecting a slower burn that rewards patience with emotional payoff. I think the anxiety representation will probably make me feel deeply seen because that is something that I struggle with. And I expect to be surprised by which characters I end up rooting for, given all the mentions of subverted tropes. Now, what am I hoping for? I hope that the video game elements enhance rather than overshadow the emotional journey. I really want the protagonist's growth to feel earned, not handed to her by the game mechanics. And I am really hoping that the world building is sound and solid and vivid. World building and the magic systems are, I mean, every bit of fantasy is my favorite, but having a really strong world that feels lived in is so important to me. So what do I hope does not happen? I really hope that the anxiety doesn't magically disappear at some point. I hope that nothing undermines the emotional stakes, because that seems to be something that the story really hinges on. And I don't want anyone else to fix her mental health. I really want that to be her own journey to heal. Okay, so what I want to do now that we've gone through all of that is I want to actually read you the first chapter and see what we think of the writing style. Because, I mean, yes, if you've gotten this far, you're obviously interested in the story component, but the story and the writing style, they're different. And we might love a story, like we might love the way an author tells a story and not like their writing style. So that, to me, they are very distinct. And I know I'm not alone in that camp. I didn't come up with that. But now we are going to dive into chapter 1 to see what you think. Now, I will say the prologue was not a favorite among the reviewers that I saw. It also, from what I can tell, is written in third person. Yes, okay, so it is third person. Whereas the book itself is written in first person. So I am going to go ahead and start with chapter 1 instead of the prologue, so that we can get a feel for what the main character is like. So why Valerius? I asked, leaning gently against the arcade machine. Once bright and vibrant, years of harsh lighting, spilled drinks, and sticky fingers had left a cabinet dull and stained. The screen itself was scratched and battered, a hairline crack spreading outward like a spiderweb dotted with morning dew. Cheesy pop music blasted from overhead speakers older than I was, but we barely heard it. There was only myself, Noah, and the world of Knights of Eternity. Because the last 2 times I led with Gabriel and Lysander, I got absolutely totaled by the third wave, Noah said, side-eyeing me with a look that dared me to question him. He flicked the joystick left and right, hopping between the main characters of Knights of Eternity. Marito, Gabriel, Lysander, and my favorite man. Oh, and my favorite main. Valerius. Black and white pixelated blocks made up his iconic ivory armor and midnight hair, while a thin line hinted at a stern expression. You got totaled because you didn't stock up on fire-resistant potions, I said, doing my best to sound non-judgmental. Zara the Fury is tough, but it's her inferno you have to watch out for, and Valerius's armor is only ice-resistant. Yeah, replied Noah, but Valerius's shield can block her beam. I resisted the urge to say, only if you time it right. Noah clicked the action button, Valerius's avatar spinning wildly as it was chosen. A pop-up appeared, prompting Noah to choose the rest of his party. If Valerius is your main, who else are you taking? I asked. Noah paused, his joystick frozen, before he chose 2 characters in rapid succession. 2 mages and a hunter. Okay, that confused me for a bit, because that's 3 characters, but that's fine. That's an interesting party, I said, thinking back on a similar playthrough I had tried. I was decimated before I'd even hit the Moonvale Mountains, no less than 3 levels before Zara the Fury's punishing boss fight. Your adventure begins, flashed on screen. My mage can cast Cover of Solace and hide my party from enemy eyes. That way I can camp, heal up, and kick Zara's head in with full health. I simply nodded. Noah had a plan, and unless he wanted my advice, he didn't. I was not going to correct him. When I first started taking Noah to the arcade, usually after school on a Friday, we played all of the classics, racing simulators, which he loved but quickly mastered. The classic shooters where he developed pinpoint accuracy worthy of a world-class assassin. Then his eyes fell on this, Knights of Eternity. It was an oddity at the arcade, even amongst the strange mix of machines that spanned decades of gaming. While most dungeon crawlers had a linear progression and 1 to 4 players, Knights of Eternity was a solo campaign with a full party management system, randomized dungeons, permadeath, and a series of increasingly brutal boss battles. The players chose one of 4 knights to begin, Valerius, Gabriel, Lysander, or Marito, and then built a party around them, ranging from mages to knights, hunters to rogues. The boss who had annihilated him no less than 3 times this evening was one of the toughest, a woman with golden eyes who wielded fire with the ease of breathing, Zara the Fury. "Nice dodge," I said, hovering at his shoulder as he rolled Valerius across the screen, bringing up the knight's shield to block an incoming arrow. "Thanks, Auntie," he said with a smirk. I slapped him gently on the back of the head, unwilling to disrupt his game. Despite the mere 5 years between us, I was indeed Noah's aunt, a fact he loved to point out. I was also the youngest of 4, a fact my sisters loved pointing out. To top it all off, I was the only one who still lived at home, a fact my mother loved pointing out. My sister Clara was married and had 1 kid, Noah, who was 12 years of age and the oldest of my nieces and nephews. And while I would never say it out loud, not even under pain of torture, he was my favorite. "I'm almost to Zara," Noah hollered, hopping from foot to foot, a sign he was either excited or really needed the bathroom. Likely both, considering he'd been playing for 2 hours. The arcade was quiet on the best of days, but it was a morgue tonight. A couple of college kids were facing off on a dance machine, of which only 3 of the 4 arrows worked, and some older guys sipped beers. Oh, that's a typo. Some older guys, without the apostrophe, sipped beers and argued about whose turn it was on an old school fighter. Other than that, Noah and I had the place to ourselves. Well, mostly. "How's my favorite troublemakers, eh?" A voice growled, a huge, meaty palm slapping my shoulder. I jumped to see the broad grin and graying temples of a man who'd been at every Sunday dinner since I was a kid. My uncle and the owner of the arcade, Jacoby. That's a cool name. "Shouldn't you 2 be out on the town, worrying your poor mothers?" He laughed with an easy warmth that made even strangers feel like family. A pity I couldn't look him in the eye. My gaze dropped automatically, and I knew the smile on my face looked closer to a wince. "I promised my sister I'd help Noah with this math homework," I said, looking guiltily at the abandoned school bags at our feet. "Well, I can see that's going well," Jacoby joked, nodding at Noah, who seemed unaware his great-uncle stood towering behind him. Jacoby leaned into the screen, frowning. "You know Valerius' armor is only ice-resistant, right?" "I know," snapped Noah. Jacoby merely shrugged, his hands raised in surrender. "Delighted you got Noah into this beauty, though," Jacoby said to me, nodding at the arcade machine. "I was so sure it was going to be a hit back in the day. Now I bet you'd be hard-pressed to find another in the whole country. A bunch of them were recalled after one of them caught fire or something. Killed the damn series before it could take off. Pity." He traced a hand lovingly over the words Knights of Eternity on the machine's side, and the title's heroes, the Gilded Knights. Gabriel, Marito, Lysander, and Valerius stood back to back, armed and at the ready. Beneath the knights, a woman knelt, her hands clasped, eyes closed in serene contemplation. Her blonde hair flowed around her in gentle waves, but for 2 slim braids that framed her heart-shaped face. She was Lady Eternity, the princess the 4 knights battled monsters and villains to save. But something stood between Eternity and the heroic knights. A woman with a smile like knives, her golden eyes vicious and cruel, reached for the unsuspecting Eternity, her obsidian talons primed and ready to strike. Zara the Fury. I shivered. There was something about those golden eyes, how they seemed to follow my every move, that had always made me uneasy. "He's actually coming up on Zara," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "Just relax," I wanted to yell at my brain. "It's Jacoby." "You don't say," Jacoby grinned. "Hey, Noah, you know how there's a little crack in the screen, right over there in the corner?" "Yeah," said Noah, eyes still fixed on the screen as he mashed buttons. "Well," Jacoby continued, "your auntie used to play this game every single day after school. And one day she got so mad that she couldn't beat a particular boss, she threw her school bag at the screen and cracked it." Noah, for the first time in hours, looked away from the screen and stared at me in a mixture of shock and, was that admiration? "Really?" he asked, his eyes almost comically wide. "It was one time," I said, a blush flooding my cheeks. Whatever Noah had been about to say was lost as the arcade machine beeped and his head swiveled back to the game. "No, no, no," Noah yelled, Zara threw a fireball, bright and orange in its pixelated fury, and it slammed into Valerius. He collapsed, body shimmering red as the words "Game Over" flashed on screen. Ah! Noah's hands balled into his hair. Why? Jacoby dropped a meaty paw onto Noah's shoulder in sympathy. Listen, once you get past her, and you will, the rest will be no bother to you, because you'll have the game down pat, you see? Noah nodded miserably while Jacoby continued. If nothing else, you should keep going just to see the end game. Toughest fight I ever had. Zara the Fury turns into this huge, "Don't tell me!" Noah yelped, hands over his ears. "I want to see it for myself, or not at all." Jacoby laughed, a booming sound that made the college kids on the dance floor jump. On the dance machine jump. My chest tightened as half the arcade turned toward us, and I had to force myself to look at Jacoby. Ignore the stares. Just ignore them. Jacoby didn't even notice. A man after my own heart. With that kind of attitude, you might be the one running this place one day, eh? He pressed a bag of tokens, more than double what we had spent that evening, into Noah's hands. Okay, so I see what the comments that are saying that it's a slower progression. I see what they're saying. Usually, even though it is a shorter chapter, and I do like the shorter chapters because they help the pacing move along, usually by the end of chapter 1, maybe chapter 2, the inciting incident happens and you're out of the old world and into the new. That's how portal fiction usually works. And it looks like this is going to be a slower build. I also thought that the anxiety was foreshadowed, but not clear enough, in my opinion, given that the book description doesn't really mention the anxiety. It's sort of like it opens up a question of why is she panicking? What did this guy do to her? When in fact it's social anxiety. So I would have liked to see that developed a little bit more in the first chapter. But on the whole, in terms of the writing style, it's very smooth. It's very fluid. There's a really good combination of dialogue to narrative. And I gotta tell you, I'm excited to dive into this one. Okay, so with all of that said, what is my TBR verdict? I'm so curious to read this one. This one is going on my TBR. I am very, very excited to see how I can connect with it, to see if it really resonates for me. I am excited about this one. And hopefully I can meet Rachel at some point and get her to sign my book. So as a final note, just as some parting thoughts, this author's pedigree, combined with the overwhelming positive reviews about emotional depth and anxiety representation, makes this feel like essential reading, frankly, for anyone interested in where LitRPG can go beyond like power fantasies. The fact that she has delivered a complete trilogy is fantastic. It means you don't have to wait. If you are more introverted and don't want to leave me a full comment, drop a book emoji below if you're going to read it, and a explosion emoji if you decide not to. We'll lean into the fury aspect of this book. So with all of that being said, thank you for being here today, and I will talk to you later. Bye. All right, that's everything for today. Subscribe to find your next book obsession, or give me your thoughts in the comments below, because I would really love to know what you think about this video. And you can support me by either clicking the like button or any of the links below. Thank you so much for being here, my darling, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.